So we have seen this differential uptake within the city, with more deprived parts of our city having lower uptake than the well and the more affluent parts of the city. We see differences across racial and ethnic groups, with somewhat lower rates, especially within our Black African and Black Caribbean communities, compared to other ethnic groups within the city. So some of this is based on legitimate questions about safety and efficacy of the vaccine. Some represents mistrust of the system and people wanting to be more engaged and informed about their decision. And some of it is access to the vaccine.
What about travelling to Europe, Professor? We know that the government has banned it until at least May the 17th, but a lot of Londoners will be thinking about a lot of connections in Europe when they can make them again. What's your assessment about whether or not travel to the continent will be possible by the summer?
This is such a challenging one. And what we've learned over the last year with the pandemic is that we need to understand the data and what the data is doing and what countries are doing to control and suppress the infection. I would be keen to understand what's happening with the trends in Europe. I want to look carefully at any potential impact that we may have on our city. And then I want to review the data much more carefully so that we can give Londoners the best advice on how to protect themselves.
There's lots of evidence about how the virus has disproportionately affected people from minority backgrounds. What can we say for sure now about that?
Well, one of the hallmarks of the pandemic has been its disproportionate impact on different communities. In the first wave, we learned about the disproportionate impact on older adults. We learned about the disproportionate impact in more deprived communities, and certainly the disproportionate impact on Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities. And we now know that although some of this may reflect different patterns of access to clinical care, it also reflects the degree of exposure to the virus, but also some of the social factors, including the households that we live in, the communities that we engage with, that place us at risk.
And what about one of the continuing mysteries of this outbreak, Professor? Why does it affect one person very badly, and then another person from a similar background will be symptom-free?
So we know that factors such as increasing age and the changes in your immune system can have an impact on the severity of disease that you have. We know that some clinical conditions can place you at higher risk, but we also know there are some social factors as well that may increase the risk of transmission of infection. So, for example, if you're living in overcrowded households or multi-generational households. So we're learning more every day. And what's important is that we're converting that learning into concrete actions for all of us as Londoners to do.
That was Professor Kevin Fenton talking to me earlier, and it's been a difficult and challenging year for so many of us, and as we've heard, there's still some way to go. So if you need support, there are details of organisations who can help on our website. Just search ITV London. Croydon Council will review housing in all high-rise blocks as a matter of urgency after ITV News revealed the shocking conditions that some council tenants are living in. They've now been moved to temporary accommodation, and the authority has started a full inquiry into exactly what went wrong. Rags Martell reports.
Living conditions that shocked a nation. A child's bath catches leaking dirty water. The floor is wet, the walls infested with mould. It's here that ITV News showed the home of Franzoy and her 2 young children.
They really should investigate the tower blocks because they're people, families with children that's living in them in damp, leak, mould. It's not just me, and nobody is doing anything. No matter who they contact, they get ignored.
Croydon Council has apologised and moved the family out. They're all now in this single hotel room.
It's still stress. I mean, we're still stuck in one room. I do not want to stay in here beyond Friday. It's not practical for me, it's not practical for my kids, and I don't want to be here any longer than I need to be.
But this is not an isolated incident. The latest housing figures for London show 250,000 homes are classified as non-decent. Of these, 84,000 are social homes provided by councils and housing associations, and 81% of them have damp problems.
Non-decent means that the home that you're living in, you shouldn't reasonably be expected to live in. And, you know, a lot of the time we're talking about problems that are actually detrimental to people's physical health, particularly that of children, but also it's the impact on people's mental health. You know, the stress, particularly in lockdown.
The figures we have are from 2018. Do you think the problem's getting better or worse?
It's definitely going to get worse. People are kind of one paycheck away from homelessness. If people lose their jobs, which very unfortunately, I'm afraid they are going to do. Also, evictions have been paused. Once evictions start up again, this problem is only going to get worse.
Croydon says it's now reviewing all its housing and high-rise blocks. But for Franzoy and her children, they still have no place they can call home. Rags Martel, ITV News, Croydon.
Police say a criminal network is fueling a huge rise in thefts of catalytic converters. In 2019, more than 9,000 were reported stolen across London. That number rose last year to more than 14,000 thefts, an increase of more than 50%. Hundreds of officers were out on an early morning raid this morning to try to break up the organisation. Sam Holder was with them.
This is the first ever police raid of its kind. More than 300 officers ready at the crack of dawn. Their target, catalytic converter thieves. Last year, the number of thefts rose by more than 50%, and police believe a gang living here is one of the main players. They've identified 8 houses on the same street, all to be entered at the same time. But things don't quite go as hoped. There is an incredible sense of frustration here. This operation has taken a year of planning. There's only one of the suspects actually at home. The police don't know if the others were tipped off or whether it's just unfortunate timing. The police are keen to show they're taking catalytic converter crime seriously. Last year, more than 14,500 were stolen in London.
What we're seeing is increased metal prices, fueling certain organised crime networks to commit more offences, to make money out of it. But they have to have the connections where to break it down and where to sell it to, because you can't, it's not just something that you or I could do.
Catalytic converters, which contain precious metals like rhodium, reduce exhaust fumes. Thieves need dodgy scrap metal dealers to break them up, like here in Hackney, where police found 18 today. They're then sent to a refinery abroad to be melted down. Gangs used to target retail parks, but during the pandemic, they've switched to hospitals and now residential streets. It takes the experts just a couple of minutes, like here in Barnet, London's worst affected area. The warning from the police is that these aren't chances. This is organised crime, and there is a real risk of violence. Steve tried to stop a gang in Finchley.
Brazen is the word, and also fearless. There was 4 of them. 2 of them, as I started beeping my horn, had large sort of metal bars about this high and started walking towards me, shouting expletives. At that point, it was a little bit woohoo. I wasn't ready for that.
He managed to reverse and escape. In total, across the raids today, 3 were arrested. At least 15 are still wanted. The police, though, say this is just the first stage of their catalytic converter crime crackdown. Sam Holder, ITV News.
And Sally's here now. Sally, we've been remembering this time last year. Tonight. The other thing I remember about last spring was how warm it was.
Oh, it was gorgeous. And do you know, on this day last year, we had 11 hours of sunshine, and we've got the photos to prove it. So let's take a look at the first one. This is Tommy and Sammy. This was sent in. There they are in the paddling pool. Cheers, boys. And then we've got the first of many rainbows. Note they're wearing coats. Their mum and dad obviously biffed them out early because it was quite cold in the morning still. And finally, a lockdown puppy in the sunshine. Darcy and Artie there. How sweet. Right, here's the weather for tomorrow. Let's take a look.
Making the most of it, whatever the weather. Octopus Energy sponsors ITV London weekday weather.
Well, it was lambs yesterday, blue tits today. Don't say I don't spoil you. Now, we have had quite a lot of cloud out there today, but some brighter spots, and it's a similar story for the next couple of days. Fair bit of cloud, bit of sunshine at times, maybe the odd isolated shower as well. But as we get to Friday, that's when things are going to be pretty wet at times and a bit windy as well, and a touch cooler too. So here's what's going on. That high pressure has edged away, low pressure becoming more dominant, and that's what's just making that weather a little bit more changeable. Not too bad, as I said, for Thursday, but for Friday, that's when this front is going to pass through, and that's bringing that slightly wetter and windier weather. Returning to tonight, well, we've got some clear spells out there, but also a fair bit of cloud around. So tomorrow, for most of us, shouldn't be quite as chilly, but there might be the odd chillier spot where we get the clearer spells and even a touch of frost out there. So fairly fresh when we start tomorrow, maybe even the odd brighter spot out there first thing, but in general, it is going to be a cloudier day. There might even be the odd spit or spot of rain out there. Hopefully dry for most of us, if that's what you're after. And temperatures fairly similar to today, highs of 12 to 13 degrees. That's just a degree above average for this time of year. Now, there is some uncertainty as to what time this cloud is going to clear. Some of you might get a little bit of evening sunshine, but for many of you, it might well stay cloudy right throughout daylight hours. But it does set us up for quite a nice day on Thursday. And for Saturday, really, we've got a mixture of some sunny spells out there and a fair bit of cloud as well at times. It's Friday that's the odd one out, really, when things are going to turn a bit wetter and windier. There might even be a bit of hail out there and some blustery showers. Touch cooler as well for Friday. And that's it. That's your full forecast for now.
Octopus Energy sponsors ITV London weekday weather.
That's how we're going to end the programme tonight as we started, remembering all those whose lives have been lost to the coronavirus this last year.
Yes, exactly. And there is a support group out there called Yellow Hearts to Remember. They sort of provide support for people who've lost someone for COVID. Their symbol, of course, is a yellow heart. And in a nod to that, Kew Gardens have created these beds with hearts in. Being Kew Gardens, they are beautiful. So I went along to take a look and meet a few of their special visitors.
So kind, he would be the first person to help anyone, and yeah, he was just my inspiration, really. He was just brilliant.
He was just so caring and thoughtful, and just, you know, you couldn't not be happy to be around him.
Honouring their fathers today, Ashima and Helen.
It's absolutely beautiful. It's just so nice having somewhere like this dedicated to everyone that's lost their life to this cruel virus, just to honour their memory.
There are 2 of these heart-shaped beds at Kew Gardens, just coming into bloom. They've been created for the Yellow Hearts to Remember campaign, a group which has supported families who've lost someone to COVID. This year in particular, this must have been a very special bed for you guys to plant, because everyone's been affected by coronavirus.
Yes, that's right.
To some extent.
Yes, yes. And it's the first time we've done something like this with a particular commemoration. And yes, it really was very special indeed.
Among those it will help commemorate, Helen's dad, Ian, a father of 4.
He was just such an incredible man. I could talk about him for days. I miss him so much, all the time.
And Ashima's dad, Philippe, a father of 2.
It hits you when you least expect it to. You just have to learn to live with it and treasure all the memories, and be grateful for the time that you've had with them.
What do you think your dad would make of this?
I think he would just be a bit shocked, to be honest. I always had this joke with him because he was so funny. I was like, I'm going to make you famous. You're so funny. I'm going to make you famous. And obviously it's not in the way that I'd ever want it to be, but I just really hope now that, you know, he would just be so proud to see this and to see what people have done and pulled together for people like him.
As the Yellow Hearts come to life this spring, everyone here is invited to remember those who have been lost, but will always be loved.
We are back with the latest after ITV News at 10. Mary is coming up with the ITV Evening News, but from me and the rest of the London team. Bye-bye.